Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about how to read your clients like a book.
Oh, this is a good one.
It is a good one. This is something that, we all kind of, as we get experience, we figure this out. But um, I'm excited to dive into this
Yeah.
and maybe pick up some new tips.
Yeah, so much of what our clients are telling us isn't actually coming out in words.
Right.
And you're right, like as you get more experience and you have more interactions, you start to kind of pick up on these things. But sometimes it's helpful to just kind of lay it all out and be a little bit more intentional about it.
Well, and, we hear all the time, buyers will say one thing and then do another, or you think they're really interested and then they ghost you.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, what are those signs that they're giving off that maybe we're not picking up on?
Yeah, and I think one of the most fundamental things, and it sounds really obvious, but it's amazing how many people don't do this well, is just really listening. And I don't mean just listening to the words they're saying, but listening to like the tone, the hesitation, the
It's
energy,
like deep listening.
deep listening.
Got it. Yeah.
So if somebody says maybe or, I don't know, but they say it with like a really like hesitant, low energy, that's very different than, maybe or I don't know. But they're kind of like, and they're looking around and,
That's a good point. Yeah, the energy.
yeah, the energy behind it.
Yeah, like if they're excited and they say, well, you can tell that they're still like,
Right, exactly. They're thinking about it. Yeah.
they're considering it.
They're mulling it over. So that's one thing. And then just noticing the words that people use. Are they using words like practical or functional, or are they saying things like I love this or this feels like home. So just the choice of words.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's huge.
Because, sometimes people aren't even aware of the words that they're choosing, I feel like.
Right. And they might be telling you something without even realizing it,
Yeah, that's a good point.
you know.
Okay, so we've talked about listening. Now let's move on to body language.
Yeah, body language is huge.
I mean, this is something that we can't ignore. I mean, especially like when you're with somebody in person.
right, in person. It's so obvious.
Just give us an example.
Okay, so think about like you're showing a house and the buyer is leaning forward. Their eyes are wide. They're like hanging on your every word.
Okay, that seems like a good sign.
Good sign, right? Versus they're standing with their arms crossed,
Oh,
not making eye contact,
okay.
maybe even like looking at their phone.
That's not a good sign.
Yeah, not a good sign.
So how do we decipher between, maybe somebody's just, kind of shy or reserved versus like not interested?
It's all about patterns,
Right.
right? So if somebody's arms are crossed for like 2 seconds, don't read into it.
Right.
But if they're consistently doing that throughout the showing and they're not really engaging with the space, then that's a sign that maybe something's up.
Okay, so we need to pay attention to like
A whole
picture.
The whole picture, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and be willing to just, ask a question like, "Hey, I notice you seem a little hesitant. Is there anything in particular that's not vibing with you or,
Right.
Anything like that?"
So it's okay to call it out.
Yeah, call it out gently.
Yeah.
Gently. You don't want to be like, "Why are your arms crossed?"
Yeah.
But just sort of like, I'm noticing is there anything that we should talk about?
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So there's one body language cue that I find really fascinating, and I have to admit, a little creepy,
Okay.
and it's mirroring.
Mirroring. Oh, yeah.
So tell me more about that, because this is something I've heard about, but I don't really...
Okay, so mirroring is when we subconsciously mimic the behavior of someone that we like and trust. It's like a natural human instinct.
Hmm.
So if you're with a client and you notice that they're subtly like mirroring your posture or your gesture.
Like if I cross my legs,
Yeah.
they cross their legs.
Yeah, or if you, touch your face and then they touch their face. It's these like subtle unconscious movements.
Oh, wow. But it's a sign that they're feeling comfortable with you.
So that's actually a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so if you're seeing that that's a good sign that you've built some rapport and they're feeling good about the interaction,
So I shouldn't be creeped out.
no, you shouldn't be creeped out.
Okay, good.
It's a good thing.
All right, so we've talked about the words they say. We've talked about body language.
Uh-huh.
But our sources also talk about different types of buyers.
Yes.
And there's one that makes me particularly nervous,
Okay.
and that's the silent buyer.
The silent buyer, yeah. They can be a little tough to crack.
Because you don't know, like, are they just thinking or are they
Uh,
totally checked out?
Exactly. And I think the biggest mistake that people make is assuming that silence equals disinterest.
Okay.
Because sometimes silence is just silence. Sometimes people need time to process,
Yeah.
especially if they're like an introvert or if they're just the type of person who likes to really think things through before they speak.
So how do we gauge that?
So I think the key is to look for other signs of engagement.
Okay.
So are they making eye contact? Are they nodding their head? Are they like looking around the space and taking it all in?
Okay.
Or are they just kind of standing there staring blankly at the wall?
Got it. Yeah, like if they're on their phone the whole time, probably not a good sign.
Probably not a good sign, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so it's really about looking for those other cues to kind of get a sense of where their head's at.
But even if they are engaged,
Yeah.
how do we get them to open up a little bit?
Right. Well, you don't want to bombard them with questions.
Right.
But you can use gentle prompts.
Okay.
So instead of saying, like, what do you think of this kitchen? You might say something like, imagine yourself cooking dinner here.
Oh, I like that.
What do you notice?
Yeah.
Or like,
That's really good.
what would you change about this space, if anything? So just kind of like open-ended questions that invite them to share their thoughts.
Yeah, it gives them permission to
That's it.
to talk.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel as like intrusive
Right.
or like you're putting them on the spot.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the silent buyer. Now, what about the opposite?
Okay.
Like the buyer who falls in love with every house.
Oh, the overly enthusiastic buyer.
Yes.
Yeah, they're fun.
They are fun.
They're exciting.
But it's almost like you're like, wait,
I
hold on a second.
pump the brakes a little.
Yeah. Like, are you sure?
Yeah, because sometimes that enthusiasm can mask a lack of clear thinking.
Oh, that's a good point.
They might be so caught up in the emotion of it all that they're not really thinking about the practicalities.
Yeah, I've had clients who are like already picking out paint colors and furniture.
Right.
And I'm like,
Before they've even made an offer.
before they've even seen like the whole house.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So how do we like bring them down to earth a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to acknowledge their excitement.
Okay.
Like, don't be a wet blanket.
Right.
But you can gently guide them towards a more balanced perspective.
Okay.
So you might say something like, I love your enthusiasm, and this is a great property. But let's take a moment to step back and make sure it really checks all your boxes.
Okay.
And maybe ask them some questions like, what are your top priorities for your new home? Or like, imagine yourself living here a year from now.
Oh, that's good.
What are some potential challenges that you might face?
Yeah. Because sometimes they're not thinking long term.
Right.
They're just thinking about right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you just kind of want to bring them back down to earth a little bit and help them see the big picture.
Okay, so we've got the quiet ones. We've got the super enthusiastic ones.
Yeah.
Now, what about the ones who just can't seem to make up their minds?
The indecisive buyer.
The indecisive buyer.
Yes.
Yeah,
Those can be challenging.
because it's like, are they ever going to choose a house?
Exactly. And sometimes they're not.
Right.
Sometimes they're just not ready. And I think the key with indecisive buyers is to remember that their indecision usually comes from a fear of making the wrong choice.
That's a good point.
They're so worried about getting it perfect that they end up paralyzed.
Yeah, they want the perfect house.
Right.
That doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you want to just reassure them that it's okay to feel unsure,
Okay.
that you're there to help them through the process.
So we need to be patient.
Patience is key.
Got it.
Yeah. And sometimes it's helpful to just like break the decision down into smaller steps.
Okay.
So instead of being like, okay, which house do you want to buy?
Right.
You might say something like, okay, out of all the homes that we've seen today, which ones are your top 3?
Okay.
And then from there, you can kind of narrow it down and help them focus on their must-haves.
So we're giving them like a roadmap.
Exactly, a roadmap
Okay.
to guide them through the decision-making process.
Got it. I like that.
Yeah, and just remind them that there's no such thing as a perfect house. Every house is going to have its pros and cons.
We all know that.
Right. So it's really about finding a home that aligns with their most important priorities.
And that's different for everybody.
Different for everybody.
Yeah.
So what might be a deal breaker for one person might be totally fine for another person.
Right.
So it's really about understanding what their non-negotiables are.
Okay, good point.
Yeah.
Now, even with all this, we can get the buyers, to narrow it down. They're feeling good.
Uh-huh.
But then there's always that one big roadblock.
And that is price.
Price.
Yeah.
Especially in today's market.
Yeah. It's definitely an issue. So how do we talk to buyers about price?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's important to acknowledge and validate their concerns.
Okay.
Price is a big deal.
It is.
It's a huge part of the decision-making process. So don't just dismiss their concerns.
Okay.
Really listen to them and let them know that you understand where they're coming from.
So empathy.
Empathy, exactly.
And then you can start to shift the focus from short-term costs to long-term investment benefits.
Okay.
So, talk about the potential for appreciation,
Right.
the tax advantages of homeownership, the stability of owning a piece of property,
So painting the big picture.
painting the big picture, exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, and be prepared to discuss different financing options.
Right.
Maybe they qualify for a special loan program, or maybe there are seller concessions that could make the purchase more affordable.
This is where, having a good lender
Yes.
on your team is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, a good lender can make all the difference.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like the key takeaway here is that,
I think the key takeaway is that building trust is everything.
okay.
When your clients feel like you genuinely care about them and you're not just trying to make a sale,
Right.
they're more likely to open up and be honest with you and ultimately trust your guidance.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we're not just selling houses. We're
Right.
we're helping people make one of the biggest decisions of
Exactly.
their life.
It's a huge decision.
Yeah.
And it's a very personal decision.
Okay, so we've talked about reading our clients,
Mm-hmm.
understanding those subtle cues.
Yeah.
Now, how do we use that information to actually connect with them on a deeper level?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I can't wait. I'm excited to dive into that.
Me too. This is going to be good. So how do we use that information to actually connect with them on a deeper level?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
It is. And I think the key is to remember that buying a home is an emotional roller coaster.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much going on.
Yeah, excitement, anxiety, fear,
All of that.
maybe a little bit of grief if they're leaving
Yeah,
a place that they love.
exactly. So you as the agent need to be able to kind of like meet them where they're at emotionally.
Okay.
And one way to do that is to simply acknowledge their feelings.
So if you sense that a client is feeling overwhelmed or hesitant, you might say something like, "It's completely understandable to be feeling a bit anxious right now. Buying a home is a big step, and there's no need to rush."
Yeah. I think sometimes as agents, we forget
Right.
that it's not,
Not a small thing.
yeah, it's like the biggest purchase they're probably ever going to make.
Exactly. So we need to be sensitive to that.
Yeah. And sometimes just acknowledging those feelings
Yes,
can really make a client feel seen and heard.
absolutely. And remember, you're not just a real estate agent, you're also a guide.
Ooh, I like that.
You're helping them navigate this complex process, and part of that is providing emotional support.
Okay. So being a guide, not just a salesperson.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of being a good guide is knowing when to speed up and when to slow down.
Okay. So pacing is important.
Pacing is huge.
Yeah.
Some clients are ready to hit the ground running while others need a little more time to process.
Right. And how do we,
It's like dancing.
oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, you need to be able to sense your partner's rhythm and move with them.
Yeah.
So if you're pushing too hard or moving too fast, you're going to step on their toes and create resistance.
So we need to be able to read those cues
Exactly.
and adjust accordingly.
Yes. Flexibility and adaptability are key.
Got it.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to working with clients.
That's a good point.
Each person is unique and their needs will change throughout the process.
So how do we take all of this information and actually put it into practice with these different types of buyers?
Okay, so let's go back to our buyer profile.
All right, let's start with the silent buyer.
Okay, the silent buyer. Remember, silence isn't always a bad thing. It could just be their way of processing. So instead of bombarding them with questions, try using open-ended prompts that invite them to share at their own pace.
So instead of saying, what do you think of this kitchen? You might say something like, imagine yourself cooking dinner here. What do you notice?
Exactly. You're painting a picture with your words and inviting them to step into the story of the house.
Okay, I like that.
It's a much gentler approach than just firing off a bunch of questions.
That makes sense. Okay, what about the overly enthusiastic buyer?
The overly enthusiastic buyer.
Okay, so with these buyers, it's all about balancing their enthusiasm with a healthy dose of practicality. You want to validate their excitement, but also make sure they're not letting their emotions cloud their judgment.
So we need to help them see the forest for the trees.
Exactly. You might say something like, I love your enthusiasm and this is a fantastic property, but let's take a moment to step back and make sure this aligns with your long-term goals and priorities.
Okay, so gently guiding them.
Gently guiding.
Back down to earth.
Back down to earth, exactly.
Okay, and what about the indecisive buyer?
The indecisive buyer. Okay, so with these buyers, patience is key. Remember, their indecision often comes from a fear of making the wrong choice. So instead of pressuring them to make a quick decision, focus on providing clarity and reassurance. You might say, I understand that choosing a home is a big decision and it's natural to feel unsure. Let's break this down into smaller steps and focus on one decision at a time. So giving them like bite-sized pieces of
It's
the
just
decision?
yeah. Break it down into manageable chunks.
Okay. And the price-sensitive buyer?
The price-sensitive buyer. Okay, so this is a big one these days. With these buyers, I think the most important thing is to acknowledge and validate their concerns. You might say something like, I understand that price is a major consideration, and it's important to find a home that fits comfortably within your budget. Let's explore some options and see what's possible.
Okay, so being upfront and honest
The
about,
financial piece of it?
yeah, transparency is key.
Okay.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more informed a client feels, the more confident they'll be in making a decision. So be prepared to explain different financing options, discuss interest rates, and break down the overall costs of homeownership.
So it's not just about throwing numbers at them, but actually
Right.
explaining what it all means.
And don't be afraid to get creative. Maybe
Mm.
there are down payment assistance programs they qualify for, or seller concessions that could make the purchase more affordable. Okay, so thinking outside the box a little bit.
Thinking outside the box.
Yeah. All right, this has been so helpful.
Good. I'm glad.
I'm really starting to see how understanding these different buyer personalities and,
Yeah.
and how to connect with them can really make a difference in my business.
Absolutely. And you know what's really cool about this?
Yeah.
Is that these skills aren't just limited to real estate.
Oh, that's a good point.
You can use them in all areas of your life.
Tell me more.
Well, think about it. Whether you're negotiating a business deal, having a difficult conversation with a loved one, or even just trying to understand a friend who's going through a tough time, the ability to read unspoken signals can be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, it's like we're unlocking this whole secret language of communication.
Exactly. And the more we practice this skill, the more we can create deeper, more meaningful relationships in all aspects of our lives.
This has been such a fascinating and eye-opening deep dive.
Mm.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on communication and human behavior.
And that's the beauty of learning, isn't it? It opens up new worlds of understanding and possibility.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into reading clients, what's one key action our listeners can take today to start putting this knowledge into practice?
I would say start with observation. Instead of just going through the motions in your next client interaction, really tune in. Pay attention to their body language, their tone of voice, the energy they bring into the room. And notice how those cues make you feel. It's like flexing a new muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
So it's not just about analyzing them, but about paying attention to our own reactions as well.
Exactly. Your intuition is a powerful tool. If something feels off, there's probably a reason. Trust your gut and be willing to ask clarifying questions. Remember, it's not about being a mind reader, but about creating a space for open and honest communication.
That's a great point. It's about building a bridge of understanding, not trying to outsmart or manipulate anyone.
Precisely.
Right.
And as you start paying closer attention, you might be surprised by how much people reveal through their unspoken signals. It's like a whole new layer of communication opens up.
And for our real estate listeners specifically, imagine how much stronger your client relationships could be if you could truly understand their unspoken needs and desires. You could anticipate their concerns, address their hesitations before they even voice them, and guide them toward their dream home with confidence and clarity.
You'd not only close more deals, but you'd also build a reputation for being a truly exceptional agent, someone who really gets their clients.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling inspired to start paying closer attention to those subtle cues in all my interactions. It's amazing how much we can learn about someone when we truly listen with our whole selves.
It's like unlocking a hidden language, and it's a skill that can enrich every aspect of your life, both personally and professionally.
Well said.
Yeah.
So, dear listeners, as you go forth into the world, I encourage you to open your eyes, your ears, and your heart to the subtle signals all around you. You might be amazed by what you discover.
And remember, everyone has a story to tell. By tuning into those unspoken cues, you can become a master storyteller, not just in real estate, but in the grand narrative of human connection.
That's a wrap on this deep dive, folks. Until next time, happy connecting.